They tell you that after 20 years on the force, nothing shocks you anymore. They say that once you've seen enough blood, enough broken bodies, enough crime scenes lit up with flashing blue and red, you grow numb to it, that the nightmares stop, that the screaming fades. But I can tell you, that's a lie, because I thought I'd seen it all. I thought I knew the rules of the job, the ugly patterns people fall into, the way violence has its own language. I thought I understood what human beings were capable of, until I got the call that night. It was a quiet shift. One of those dead hours where the city feels like it's holding its breath. The dispatcher's voice barely carried any urgency, just another abandoned property. Another welfare check, something routine. I remember pulling up to the house, thinking I'd be in and out in 15 minutes. But the second I stepped inside, I felt it. The air wasn't just still, it was wrong. Too heavy, too cold, too aware. It clung to me like it knew I didn't belong there. And when I reached the back room, flashlight trembling against the peeling wallpaper, I saw something that made me forget 20 years of procedure, 20 years of discipline. I ran. I had never run before. Not from a suspect, not from a crime scene, not from anything. But that night, I did, and I've been trying to explain to myself why ever since. I haven't told anyone this before. Not my captain, not my partner, not even my wife. And God knows she's put up with the weight of everything else I've dragged home from the job. But this was different. This wasn't another story about a body in an alley, or the 1,000-yard stare of a mother who's lost her child. This wasn't the kind of horror you can write up in a report and file away in a cabinet. This was something that followed me home, that still follows me, and I think it will, for the rest of my life. I need you to understand, I'm not drunk, I'm not losing my mind. I'm telling you this because I just need someone to listen. I can't tell it to people who know me. They'd look at me differently, and I can't handle that. But you seem like someone who's seen strange things too. You seem like someone who won't laugh when I tell you that after 20 years of homicide cases, the thing that broke me wasn't human at all. The night it happened, I didn't think much of the call. That's the worst part. It started like any other. Just a call about an abandoned property on the edge of town. A place people said used to be a cabin in the woods, before the sprawl of the suburbs grew around it. But the trees still pressed in close, cutting off the sky, and by the time I got there, it felt like stepping into a pocket of nowhere. No signal on the radio, no cell bars, just quiet. Too quiet. You ever get that feeling that silence isn't really silence? That it's more like a blanket smothering everything natural, like even the birds and insects know something's wrong. That's what I felt pulling up to that cabin. My boots on the porch were the only sound, and I swear to you, the wood didn't just creak, it groaned, like something inside was aware of me already. I remember telling myself it was nothing, just another rundown property, but the air was heavy, pressing in on me, and as soon as I stepped inside I felt this pull, not physical, but something in the back of my head telling me, you shouldn't be here, you need to leave, but I didn't. 20 years on the job teaches you to ignore instinct, to push through fear. That's how you get answers. The first room was empty, except for old furniture, but the walls had stains that didn't make sense. Not blood, not water damage, something in between, like shadows trapped in the plaster. I tried my radio, static, no signal. I tried my phone, nothing. That's when I felt it. The first knock. It was soft, not behind me, not in front of me, just around. A hollow tap that seemed to come from the walls themselves. I froze, listened, and when I didn't move, it came again. Not louder, closer. I thought maybe it was the wind, but the windows were all boarded shut. No air moving, no draft. Just those deliberate little knocks, like someone testing the sound. Like someone making sure I could hear them. I need you to believe me when I say that wasn't the worst of it. The worst came later, when the noises followed me home. Creepy noises in my own house scratched behind the walls, a whisper slipping in just as I was about to fall asleep. And the dreams. God, the dreams. They weren't dreams. They were rehearsals. Things that happened in the cabin replayed in my mind before I ever actually walked through them. That's why I can't sleep anymore. That's why I keep talking in whispers, even when I'm alone. Because I don't think I'm really alone anymore. And that's why I'm telling you this. Because I need you to promise me something. If you ever hear about that place, if you ever find yourself near the cabin in the woods with no signal, don't go inside. Don't test it. Don't listen to the knocks. I know curiosity eats at people, but there are things out there that don't want to be solved. Things that aren't crimes to investigate, but traps waiting for someone to take the bait. Promise me you won't try to find it. Please, because if you do, you won't come back the same. You'd think after 2 decades of homicide work, a place wouldn't get under my skin. But that cabin had something I'd never felt before. I need you to picture it the way I saw it, because the little details are what matter most. They're the parts that linger, the parts I can't forget, no matter how many nights I try to drink myself into dreamless sleep. The cabin sat at the very end of a dirt road, half swallowed by trees that bent in toward it like they'd been growing with one purpose, to hide it. The forest didn't look natural. The branches reached too far, twisting into each other like gnarled fingers, blotting out what little moonlight there was. It was a suffocating kind of shade. You could walk 20 steps from the clearing and the world behind you would vanish. No horizon, no escape. The structure itself should have been forgettable. A 1-story rectangle of weathered wood, roof sagging under the weight of years. But the architecture was wrong in ways you wouldn't notice unless you stared too long. Windows are slightly uneven, angles just a fraction sharper than your eye expected. It gave me the same feeling as looking at a reflection where the mouth is smiling but the eyes aren't. Familiar, but not right. Locals had whispered about the place for years. I'd heard some of it in passing when I was still a rookie. Stories told in low voices at bars after shift, like warnings disguised as jokes. They said kids who went there came back quiet, withdrawn, like they'd seen something they weren't supposed to. A few people swore the cabin had been built on cursed land. Others claimed it wasn't built at all, that it just appeared. One old-timer told me it had been standing longer than the town itself, though no one could explain why it didn't show up on any official records. I always thought it was just local folklore. Every small town has its ghost stories, right? But standing there, watching the way the shadows seemed to crawl across the cabin walls, even when nothing moved, it felt less like rumor and more like memory. Like the place itself was aware of me, waiting. Inside, the air was heavier than outside. Not stale, not musty, just heavy. Like walking into a room where someone's been crying for hours. My boots echoed against warped floorboards, the sound swallowed almost instantly. That's the first thing I noticed. Sound didn't travel normally there. It died too quickly. The living room, or what passed for one, was sparse. A rotted couch sat against one wall, cushions sunken deep like something had nested there. A coffee table with legs unevenly sawed off, tilted as though it had been placed there for a specific reason, not convenience. And a clock on the wall, pendulum swinging but hands frozen at 3:17. I stared at that for a long time, waiting to see if it would change. It didn't. Not once. When I moved further in, I realized the silence outside wasn't just in my head. The birds were gone. No insects buzzing. Not even the sound of wind through the trees. It was like the whole forest had stopped breathing the moment I crossed the threshold. That's when I started to feel watched. Not in the usual way people give off weight when they stare at you. This was different. It was like the walls themselves had eyes. Like every plank of wood was angled just slightly toward me. I tried not to think about it. Years on the force teach you to compartmentalize, to push down unease. But as I walked through the narrow hallway, I noticed the mirrors. 2 of them opposite each other. Dirty glass, cracked edges. I should have just kept moving. But something made me look. I wish I hadn't. The first reflection was normal enough. Me. Tired face, badge catching the dim light. But in the second, across from it, the image lagged, just by a fraction of a second. But it did. I'd turn my head, and the reflection would follow a breath too late, like it had to remember what it was supposed to copy. And when I lifted my hand to test it, I swear, God help me, I swear, my reflection smiled. My mouth didn't, but the glass did. That was the first time I thought about leaving, just turning around and walking out. But something held me there. A pull I can't explain, like invisible fingers hooking into my chest, dragging me deeper into the house. The kitchen was worse. Every drawer had been pulled open, utensils scattered across the floor like someone had been searching for something, or like they wanted to make sure I knew they'd been searching. There was a pot still sitting on the stove, long rusted through, but inside wasn't dust. It was water, fresh, clear, and cold when I touched it. You're starting to see why. I can't explain this to anyone in uniform. How do you write that in a report? Unnatural presence observed in the kitchen. Water in a rusted pot is unexplained. They'd laugh me out of the precinct. But you understand. You know what I mean when I say this wasn't just a building. It was alive, and the deeper I went, the more it made itself known. The knocks didn't stop. They followed me, sometimes from the walls, sometimes from beneath the floorboards. Rhythmic, patient, not demanding attention, just reminding me they were there. And every time I paused, the knocking paused too, like it was breathing with me. The final detail came when I found the bedroom. The door closed, swollen wood, resisting my push until it finally gave in. Inside, dust covered everything, except one thing, the bed. Sheets neatly tucked, pillow fluffed, and there on the nightstand was another clock. Different make, different style, but the time was the same, 3:17. That was when I realized time didn't work right in there. That was when the whispers began. They weren't words at first, just the hush of breath against my ear, like someone standing too close in an empty room. But the longer I stood there, the clearer they became. Phrases I couldn't understand, syllables strung together like pieces of a language that wasn't meant for me. My throat went dry, my pulse thundered in my ears, and I swear, one of the whispers used my name. I didn't leave that first night. Maybe I should have. Maybe that would have been the smartest thing I'd ever done. But years of homicide work had carved something dangerous into me, a refusal to back down from what I didn't understand, and the cabin knew it. It took that stubbornness and wrapped it tight around my throat. The first disturbance was small, almost gentle. I'd set my things down in the living room bag, flashlight, sidearm on the table, and stepped away just long enough to check the kitchen again. When I came back, the bag was zipped shut. I hadn't left it zipped. I remember the way my hands hovered over it, not wanting to touch, not wanting to prove what I already knew. It felt like the place was letting me know it could touch my things, that my belongings weren't mine anymore. The knocking followed after, soft, deliberate, at first from the far wall, faint enough that I thought maybe it was just branches brushing against the siding. But when I stepped closer, the sound shifted, moved to the floorboards beneath me. 3 knocks, a pause, 3 more. My badge number is 3 digits. The last 3 knocks matched it exactly. I tried to sleep that night, stretched out on the rotted couch, gun within reach, though I knew it wouldn't matter. The silence pressed down heavy, smothering, but at some point, exhaustion won. That's when the dreams started. They weren't normal dreams. No drifting images, no muddled storylines. Just the cabin, always the cabin. I'd walk through the rooms, the same as I had when awake, but everything felt sharper. The clocks ticked in the dreams. The mirrors didn't just lag, they watched, and the whispers were clear. To clear, they whispered things I'd heard in my real life. Words said at crime scenes. Confessions from suspects. Pleas from victims. And worst of all, the whispers repeated things I'd thought but never spoken. Memories I'd buried. They weren't just in my head, they were in the walls. I woke drenched in sweat, the echoes of those whispers still in my ears. Only it wasn't just in my head. The whispers were in the room with me, faint, overlapping, circling. I lay there frozen, too afraid to open my eyes, too afraid not to. When I finally sat up, the first thing I noticed was the door. I'd locked it. I remember clearly twisting the bolt, hearing the click, double-checking, because I wasn't about to let anything creep in on me during the night. But now it stood open, not wide, just enough to remind me it could. That became the rhythm of the night. The knocking, the whispers, the doors. Always the doors. Sometimes they opened, sometimes they closed, but never when I was looking. And every time I touched the handle, the metal felt warm, like someone had just gripped it from the other side. The furniture began to move by the third night, subtle at first. A chair angled differently than I remembered. The coffee table nudged a few inches closer to the couch, then bolder. I'd step into the kitchen and hear the unmistakable scrape of wood against wood in the living room, only to return and find the couch shifted toward the center of the room like it was inching closer to me each time I left. The worst was the bed. I hadn't touched it, hadn't sat on it, hadn't gone near it since finding the perfectly made sheets. But on the fourth morning, I woke up not on the couch where I'd fallen asleep, but tucked into that bed. Sheets are tight around me, pillow beneath my head, like something had carried me there. Do you know what it feels like to wake up in a place you don't remember walking to? To feel your own body betraying you, moving while you sleep. I lay there, heart pounding, unable to move for minutes. When I finally threw the sheets off, I found the clock on the nightstand ticking, not frozen anymore. Each swing of the hand lined up with my pulse, hammering in my ears. I smashed it against the floor. The sound was louder than it should have been, echoing down the hallway like the cabin was mocking me for trying. And even after the glass shattered, I swore I heard ticking, not from the pieces, from the walls. The whispers in the dreams grew clearer, more demanding. They called me by name now, not detective, not officer. My first name, over and over, as though wearing it down, softening it until it wasn't mine anymore. And sometimes, just before I woke, they would say something else, short phrases I couldn't understand, but they left me with the taste of rot in my mouth. One night, I dreamed I was standing in front of the mirror in the hallway, only this time, it didn't lag. It didn't mimic. It leaned forward, out of sync with me. The smile stretched wider, teeth too many, eyes too hollow. And when I woke up, gasping, clawing at the sheets, I found the mirror angled toward the bed. It hadn't been before. The escalation wasn't just in the house. It was in me. My hands shook constantly. I'd go to write in my notebook something I'd always done at crime scenes, jotting down details, and I'd find words I didn't remember writing. Not mine. Curves and loops of letters in a language I'd never seen. Once, when I tried to tear a page out, the paper burned my fingers. Just for a second, but enough to leave the skin red, and the cabin seemed to feed off it. The more I feared, the more it gave. Doors slamming when I tried to steady myself. Knocks pounding like heartbeats when I tried to sleep. The whispers no longer waited for dreams. They followed me in waking hours, brushing against my ear even when I was standing in sunlight. By the end of the week, I wasn't sure where I ended, and the place began. Every sound was suspect. Every shadow lingered too long, and every time I tried to leave, something stopped me. Sometimes it was the forest so thick I couldn't push through, even though I knew the road wasn't far. Sometimes it was my own body, freezing in place when my hand touched the doorknob. Unable to take the final step, it wanted me there. And the worst part? Some small, poisoned part of me wanted to stay. I kept telling myself I'd last one more night. Just one more. That's how I justified staying. A man who spent 2 decades walking into crime scenes couldn't be run out by creaking boards and whispered dreams. That's what I told myself, anyway. The truth was, by then, the cabin wasn't letting me leave. It happened on a night when the whispers were the loudest they'd ever been. I had pressed my palms against my ears, desperate to block them out, but the sound didn't come from outside anymore. It pulsed from inside my skull, a vibration behind the bones, buzzing until my vision blurred. That's when I heard something different. A scrape, a physical sound, not part of the endless voices. Something is shifting beneath me. The floorboards in the corner of the living room. At first I thought it was just another trick, but the scrape came again, steady, insistent. I grabbed my flashlight, crossed the room, and crouched low. The beam fell on one particular plank, darker than the others, edges worn, as though they'd been lifted before. My hands hesitated above it, trembling. Then I pried it up. Beneath the floorboards was a small compartment, hollowed out by hands long before mine. Inside, wrapped in what had once been cloth, but now was nothing but rotted threads, lay a book, leather-bound edges stiff with age. The smell of mildew and iron rising from it as I pulled it free. A journal. I don't know how long I sat staring at it. The whispers dimming around me, as though they were waiting to. The first page cracked as I opened it. The ink faded, but legible and cramped. Desperate handwriting. If you're reading this, you've heard them too. They never stop. They never leave. Don't look in the mirrors. Don't listen when they use your name. Don't. The words cut off, the rest of the page torn. I turned to the next. More frantic entries. A man describing his descent, night after night. Knocks in the walls, furniture moving. Dreams of figures in the hallway that grew clearer each time. And then it doesn't want to kill me. It wants to keep me. It wants to wear me. The words dug into me. It wants to wear me. I read them over and over, my lips moving silently, as if saying them out loud might make them less real. Further in, the handwriting shifted, jagged strokes, ink smeared like the writer's hand had been shaking too hard to hold the pen. Those pages weren't warnings anymore. They were confessions. Murder. Blood spilled in the cabin, not by choice, but by compulsion. It told me who to hurt. One entry read. It showed me what they'd done, and when I tried to stop, it moved my hands for me. My stomach turned, bile rising in my throat. I snapped the book shut, but even then, I could feel the words pressing against me, like heat radiating from the pages. The whispers hadn't gone away. They were reciting the same sentences I'd just read, word for word, in voices that weren't my own. I shoved the journal back into the compartment, but it was too late. I'd seen too much. That night, I didn't dream of wandering the cabin. I dreamed of crime scenes. Cases I'd worked on over the years. Bodies on floors, photographs pinned to evidence boards, names I hadn't spoken in years. Only this time, the faces weren't blurred by memory. They were sharp, too sharp, and every single one of them turned to look at me. They spoke in unison. You didn't solve us. It did. I woke screaming, drenched in sweat, clawing at my own throat as though trying to pull the words out. The journal was on my chest. I hadn't put it there, and when I opened my eyes fully, I saw something new. The walls. Carvings I hadn't noticed before, faint and shallow, like someone had tried to erase them. Symbols etched into the wood. Circles, spirals, eyes, and in the center of one wall, faint letters carved over and over again until the grooves were deep enough to cast shadows in the flashlight's beam. Stay. It was then that I understood. The cabin wasn't haunted by something that had passed through. It was alive. It remembered every voice, every death, every secret whispered in its walls. It fed on them, it collected them, and now it wanted me. The whispers weren't just voices anymore. They began to layer, one on top of another, building into a chorus that pressed against the air itself. I backed into the hallway, light shaking in my hand, when I caught movement in the mirror. Only this time, I didn't see myself lagging. I saw myself smiling, grinning wide with teeth I didn't recognize. My reflection raised its hand before I did, tapping the glass from the inside. 3 times. Slow, deliberate. I dropped the flashlight, but the room didn't go dark. The carvings on the walls glowed faintly, pale light pulsing like veins. And the voice wasn't whispering anymore. It was clear, singular, direct. You're mine now. I don't know how long I stood frozen, my breath shallow, heart rattling in my chest. Every instinct screamed to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. The journal lay open at my feet, the pages fluttering though there was no wind. Words I hadn't seen before inked themselves across the paper, letter by letter, as though written in real time. You stayed too long, now you stay forever. Something inside me cracked then. Years of training, decades of logic and reason, all of it buckled beneath that one undeniable truth. I wasn't investigating the cabin. The cabin had been investigating me, testing me, breaking me down piece by piece until I fit into its collection. That was the revelation. It wasn't about murderers hiding in the woods, or vengeful spirits clinging to old walls. It was the cabin itself, a thing older than records, older than the trees surrounding it. It didn't just house evil, it was evil, and I'd walked straight into its mouth. I don't remember deciding to leave. I just remember standing at the cabin door with my keys in my hand, as if the thought had finally pushed through all the static in my head. Run, just run. The journal still lay on the floor behind me, pages splayed open like a gaping mouth. I didn't bother closing it this time. Whatever it had to say, I'd already heard. Whatever it wanted to finish, it could whisper it to the walls after I was gone. I shoved the door open and stepped into the night. The air was sharp, the kind of cold that bites the lungs and wakes you up, but it didn't feel like freedom. The forest was waiting, silent, watching. My truck was parked only 30 feet away. I could see it. I could almost taste the relief of turning the key in the ignition, of hearing the engine drown out the whispers. My boots crunched over pine needles and frost. 1 step, 2 steps, then I blinked, and the truck was gone. Not gone, exactly moved. Further ahead, still visible between the trees, but not 30 feet anymore. 50, maybe 60. I told myself I was disoriented, that panic was skewing my sense of distance. But the harder I ran toward it, the further it seemed to slide back into the tree line, like bait on a hook. My chest burned. My legs screamed. I stumbled over roots that hadn't been there a second before. The forest was folding in on itself, paths winding back to where I'd started. I turned once, just once, and there was the cabin again, sitting quiet behind me. No matter which way I went, I circled back to it. I dropped to my knees, gasping, my palms digging into the earth. The soil was warm, almost pulsing. When I pulled my hands away, they were streaked with dark stains. Not dirt, not mud, something thicker. I didn't want to smell it. The whispers swelled then, not distant, not layered, but close, personal. Every voice I'd ever heard, every name I'd ever spoken, coiling in my ears. Stay. I don't know how long I sat there, rocking back and forth like a child lost in a store. Eventually, I forced myself up, stumbling into the trees again, refusing to look back. I don't remember walking, only waking hours later, at the edge of a clearing. The truck was there this time, close enough to touch. I lunged for it, hands scraping the cold metal of the door handle, breath shuddering with relief. I fumbled the keys into the lock, turned it, climbed inside. The seat was real beneath me, the steering wheel solid against my grip. I shoved the key into the ignition. I turned it. The engine roared to life. I laughed. I couldn't help it. A ragged, broken laugh that tore from my throat like a sob. Headlights cut through the trees, spilling golden beams across the dirt road. I threw it into gear, slammed the gas, and the truck lurched forward. The road stretched ahead, twisting, familiar. I recognized the bends, the dips, the landmarks. I'd made it out. I had to have made it out. Only the further I drove, the stranger it became. The trees leaned closer, branches clawing at the windows like hands. The road stretched longer, repeating itself. I passed the same fallen log 3 times, the same jagged stump 4. The dashboard clock froze at 3:17 a.m. No matter how far I drove, it never moved. That was when I saw it, in the mirror. The cabin, not behind me, but inside the reflection, framed where the rear window should have shown the forest. Its windows glowed faintly, like eyes, and standing in the doorway was me. Not the man slumped in the driver's seat, exhausted and hollow, but the smiling one, the grinning reflection. He raised his hand, slowly, deliberately, and pressed his palm to the inside of the glass. And for a moment, just a breath, I felt the steering wheel disappear. I felt wood beneath my hands, not leather. A door frame instead of a dashboard. The sensation of standing, waiting, watching someone else drive away. Then it was gone. I slammed the brakes, the truck skidding sideways on gravel. My chest heaved. The mirror showed nothing but darkness now, just trees, just night. I sat there for a long time, hands gripping the wheel until my knuckles ached. The engine humming beneath me like a heart I couldn't shut off. I could keep driving, pretend I was free, pretend I'd broken loose from whatever the cabin was. But deep down, I knew the roads would bend back eventually. The forest would turn me around. The cabin would be there, waiting, door open, journal ready, because maybe I'd never left at all. I haven't been able to sleep since that night. Not the kind of sleep that matters. Anyway, I drift off sometimes, but it's shallow, restless, and filled with the same looping dream of me standing in the cabin doorway, watching myself drive away into a road that never ends. And when I wake, I'm never sure which version of me I am. The one who ran, or the one who stayed. That's why I'm telling you this. I don't want to carry it alone anymore. I haven't told anyone, not my old colleagues, not my family, not even the shrink they forced me to see after the breakdown. You're the first person I've trusted with this, and I don't know why. Maybe it's because you're still listening. Maybe it's because you haven't laughed or walked away. Maybe it's because, in your silence, you remind me of the cabin itself, waiting, absorbing, never judging. But you need to understand something. The cabin is still with me. Even though I left it behind or thought I did, it never really let go. Every night I hear it. The creak of the floorboards, the soft hush of the wind through its rafters. Sometimes the whispers, faint and patient, like they're speaking through the walls of my apartment instead of those pine-planked halls. When I close my eyes, I can smell the wood smoke again. I can taste the copper temps of the soil I fell into when I tried to run. The city hasn't washed it away. Time hasn't dulled it. You might think I'm broken. Maybe I am. But there's a piece of me that believes this was never about escaping. That's what I didn't understand back then. The forest, the roads, the cabin, they weren't obstacles. They were choices. And I made mine. I left. Or maybe I only thought I did. Because the more I turn it over in my head, the more I wonder if leaving was just another way of staying. I've started noticing things. Mirrors that show me smiling when I'm not. Shadows that linger longer than they should. And sometimes, God help me, I find dirt under my fingernails, even though I haven't touched soil in weeks. It's the same dark stain I wiped from my hands that night. The same earthy, iron-rich smear. I scrub it off, but it always comes back, like the cabin is marking me, reminding me that I'm still tied to it. Do you see why I can't sleep? Do you see why I can't live like I used to? My badge means nothing now. The job, the years of solving cases, of looking for patterns in blood and bodies, It feels laughable. I thought I'd seen horror before. I thought I knew what evil was. But this dot plus this was different. It wasn't about crime, or motive, or human cruelty. It was older than that. Hungrier. Patient enough to wait decades, centuries, for someone dumb enough to wander inside and stay too long. And I stayed too long. Long enough to hear it. Long enough to feel its grip in my chest. Long enough that part of me is still there. If you ever find that place, and I pray you don't, but if you ever stumble across a cabin like the one I've described, promise me something. Don't go inside. Don't stay the night. Don't convince yourself it's just an abandoned building in the woods. It isn't. Burn it if you can. Salt the earth if you must. But never, ever let yourself believe you can outlast it. You can't. Because it doesn't matter if you run. It doesn't matter if you drive until the road breaks and your lungs burn. The cabin doesn't care about distance. It isn't a place you visit. It's a place you carry. I wish someone had told me that before I went. I wish someone had warned me. Maybe then I wouldn't be here now, whispering into the dark, hoping the weight feels lighter if I pass some of it on to you. But maybe that's the point. Maybe that's how it spreads, not through land deeds or maps, but through stories, through confessions like this one, through listeners like you, who nod and lean closer and let the words in. So I'll say it one last time, softer now. If you ever find it, burn it. Don't stay. Don't listen to the creaking floorboards. Don't search for journals under the floor. Don't wait for the night to pass. It won't. It never does. And if you already hear it, if my words have made something stir in your walls, if the silence in your room feels heavier now than it did before, then maybe it's too late for you, too. Tell me something. Have you ever heard a noise in your house when you were certain you were alone? A soft creak on the floorboards, the kind that makes you hold your breath and wait, straining your ears just to be sure. Have you ever felt a chill pass over you in your own bed, like someone leaned too close, even though you knew no one was there? I ask, because I need to know if it's just me, if I'm losing my grip, or if you felt it too. Sometimes, sharing these things, putting them into words, makes them less heavy. Other times, it makes them real. I can't tell which this will be for you, so tell me, have you ever stayed somewhere you shouldn't have? Have you ever felt watched, followed, or whispered to when there was no one around? Leave your story. I read every single one, even if I shouldn't. Maybe I'm looking for proof that I'm not alone in this. Maybe I'm looking for a warning in your words. Something I missed on my own. But listen to me when I say this. Don't take this lightly. These things they listen to, too. Every time we speak of them, they lean closer. And every time someone else believes, they grow stronger. So, if you comment, if you share your story, just do it carefully. And whatever you do, don't listen to the next story alone.